All right, Molly, thanks so much for doing this. My first question that I have for you is tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the mental health space.
So let's see a little bit about myself. I was a massage therapist and life coach before I came to couples and family therapy. I did my undergraduate degree in Russian history, but then decided I didn't want to go on to be a PhD, to be a historian. It just felt dry and dusty and not fun and exciting to me. So I moved out to Eugene from the East Coast, kind of started getting excited about being in nature, hiking, the mountains, all the great things about the West Coast here. And was a massage therapist for 15 years, I want to say. Um, but, I come from a family that has a lot of mental health and addiction issues. I would say myself, I have mental health and addiction issues. So I found that as a massage therapist, I was always really interested in what it was that was stressing people out, what was going on beneath the surface. I was much more interested in, the mind, the heart, spirituality than I was in muscles. So I went back to school to study couples and family therapy, and here I am.
So, what do you do now as a mental health professional?
So now, as a mental health professional, I work with individuals, with couples, a little bit with families, with teenagers, and support people having better self awareness, better understanding of what it is that's getting in the way of them having the kind of lives they want, the kind of relationships they want, and helping people develop skills and strategies to have more of the kinds of lives that feel meaningful and purposeful to them.
And what are the kind of modalities that you use in your work?
So, the overarching modality that I use as a marriage and family therapist is systemic therapy. So that means, unlike a lot of other mental health practitioners, I'm not just thoughtful about what's happening like inside someone's mind, inside their own individual life, as though that's a vacuum, but also really thoughtful about the relationships that shape us, right? Like family of origin, if there's an intimate partner, our friends, our communities, our culture, the systems that we inhabit that shape us, and how those are sometimes very supportive, and how we can make those supportive, make conscious choices about placing ourselves in supportive systems, and then sometimes those systems are not very supportive, and how that impacts us. Um, and of course, there's nuance there: supportive, not supportive. That's kind of a binary, when the reality is the systems that we're embedded within are a multitude of experiences for the individual. So that's the big picture. And then within that, I also use cognitive behavioral therapy, internal family systems, solution focused therapy. Those are some of my favorites that I kind of draw on frequently and kind of come back to again and again.
Which one do you use the most?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say I'm always using solution focused therapy. That's just like a baseline for me of like, when is the problem not a problem? What would you like instead? So it's like focusing on the solutions rather than the problems, and getting really curious about like, what would be a win here? How would you like to show up in this situation? Um, yeah, but I use the other two quite frequently as well. But solution focused is really, I'm really looking at like, how can things get better, or when are things better?
hmm So, given that you work with couples and stuff, how do you sort of use solution-focused therapy in that sense?
Yeah. Um, so, it starts from the very beginning of like, people come in and they've got the laundry list of like problems, whether that's we're fighting all the time, or we're so disconnected, we barely even see each other, we barely talk, we don't really have a lot in common anymore. And it starts with looking at like, what would be better? What would you like to be different? How would you like to feel in your relationship? How would you like to be showing up that's different than the way you're showing up now? Um, are there any times you are feeling connected? Are there any times you're not fighting? And what are the circumstances that give rise to those experiences? Because most of the time, even when we're having the worst moments of our lives, when we're really in our like darkest periods, if you really are thoughtful about it, you realize it's not happening all the time. So getting really curious about, yeah, when things are going well, what does that look like? What are you doing differently? And sort of how can we build on that?
Hmm. And give me some examples of what you've seen in the therapy room with like couples that, that some of the common themes that you notice when working with couples.
Okay, so common themes when working with couples. Okay, so conflict, right? That's a big thing that people come to therapy for. That causes a tremendous amount of distress. People get together with their beloved thinking, we're going to ride off into the sunset and happily ever after. And then they come to realize that, okay, we're two different people, we see things differently, and we bump up each other's dysfunction or pain in ways that is really triggering. Often people find that they partner with someone who mirrors some of the experiences that they had with a caregiver, parent, close family member. And that brings up some of their hardest emotional experiences, makes them act in ways that they don't like themselves when they're acting that way, right? These are things that do not show up in our friendships, even with our best friends, maybe with our very closest friends, right? We have some challenges, but when we are in an intimate relationship, that can bring up some of our greatest attachment wounds. So I didn't really talk about attachment, but that's something else I'm thinking about when I work with couples. So, people will make the mistake in conflict of trying to litigate, right? Who's right? But the reality is that's a losing strategy, because there is no way to win an argument. Even if you win and you've declared yourself the winner, or your partner gives up, fine, you win. That's not a win, right? Because there's so much damage that's been done to the relationship in
Hmm.
the conflict and in the fighting. So, what I'm always looking for is like, can we really slow it down? Can we really come back to a place of love and talk about what happened, right? How did I see what happened, right? Not that this is the only truth, but here's what I perceived, here's what I felt, here's what I saw, here's what it brought up for me. Here's the emotions that I experienced in that. I was afraid, I was angry, I was hurt, whatever. Here's the story that I told about that, right? And that can take us to really vulnerable places. Like the story I was telling is that I am worthless, or you don't care about me, or this is never going to work, right? And then, here's like a request, here's what I'd like to be different. And, if we can get into a place where both people are softened a little bit, right? Not so armored up, not so like with, warrior energy, but willing to listen, willing to try to make that repair, then, for the other partner to say, wow, yeah, that makes sense. I can see how you would think that. I can see how you would be feeling that. I can understand how, how that experience was triggering for you. And yes, I'm willing to try to do better.
Hmm. And so how do you sort of help navigate couples through those challenges? Because no couples are the same. They're uniquely different in so many ways.
Yeah. So, gosh, it takes, couples therapy is so different than individual therapy, because with individual therapy, I can sort of just, hold space, let the person kind of make their own associations. But with couples therapy, I have to be a lot more active. and almost like refereeing, right? Because sometimes people in session will start doing and saying things that are going to be harmful and are going to be counter to their purposes of coming to therapy. It's just going to be like, here's what we always do at home. We're just going to do it in the therapy office. And I have to be like very intentional about like, wait, stop. No, pause. Let's listen to your partner. Okay, now it's your turn. Or how does that make you feel? Slowing it down. So I'm sorry, I don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
So like um is it kind of a challenge for you as a mental health professional to sort of navigate through because you have to referee, the one side and then another side. So
Mhm. Um, it is challenging, but it's challenging for me in a really interesting and engaging way. I don't, um, what's, I think, my my superpower is that I can really bring a lot of compassion to both parties and sort of model what it's like to not necessarily agree with you, but have compassion for how you're feeling and, be thoughtful about, okay, yeah, given what I know about, the way you grew up and gosh, the way mom or dad or whoever treated you, sure, I can see why you would have reacted so strongly to this particular, experience or this thing that your partner said. That must have felt really hurtful. So if I can stay in compassion and curiosity with people, and sort of model that, then it makes it a lot less frustrating for me, that they're not doing it right, because I
mhm,
just have so much compassion for people. And also just, I have this baseline understanding that relationships are difficult.
mhm. So and what have you learned in doing this kind of work as a marriage and family therapist?
What have I learned in doing this work? Well, reiterating that relationships are hard. Um, Gosh, and that, not just that, but that relationships have the opportunity to be really a spiritual practice, um, that I think we, gosh, if we can, if we can confront ourselves being hurt by and hurting the people we love the most and remain open-hearted, remain compassionate, try to do better, um, try to, be our best selves, that that's the work. That's really meaningful and really incredible.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything that you'd like to learn while you're a marriage licensed and marriage therapist, or is there something that you want to learn, like in terms of something new? Like, hell, gosh, I haven't learned. I want to learn this more.
Mhm. I mean, so many things. It's such a broad field that has just like so many branches, and there are so many trainings and so many wonderful teachers. And I think when I think about like all that I still have to learn, because in some ways I still feel like I'm very new to this field, and I am. I only have been licensed since May of this year. Um, so I'm still a baby in some ways in this field. So I want to learn everything, and I'm pretty um, I'm pretty voracious in my like reading and taking classes and courses. And really, it's sort of just the practice itself that, like the more folks I work with, the more couples, the more families, the more individuals, um, the better equipped I feel to sort of be competent in different situations.
Hmm. And so for the people that want to be a licensed in marriage and family therapist, what advice would you give them?
Mm-hmm. Whew, let's see. Well, you know, so many things. Graduate school is tough, but just kind of like hang in there and don't worry too much about getting A's on everything. Your clients are never going to know what grades you got. I mean, I worked really hard in graduate school and I like did well, but I think I and many other people put a lot of stress on ourselves that wasn't necessary, when it's just like you're just here to go through a process. And, as long as you learn what you need to learn and, you know, complete your classes, you'll be fine. Um, what else? I mean, you're going to have to be ready to do a lot of like moral inventory. I mean, that's what they call it in 12 steps, but like it's going to bring up your own stuff, undoubtedly. You're going to be reading case studies that are going to remind you of your own family. You're going to be meeting with people who have traumas or, paranoid, like phobias or whatever, that's going to remind you of your own stuff. And you're going to be like, oh, wow, I have work to do on myself. And you're going to need to do your own work and ideally have a therapist or have people that you meet with who know what it's like to be in this kind of work. Um, and really, like, self-care is really crucial, not just because it's like nice to take a bubble bath or get a massage, but like if you're not taking really excellent care of yourself as a therapist, a mental health practitioner, I would say anyone who's like in the helping fields, you are at great risk for not only burning out and not being able to do this work, but also acting unethically. And what I mean by that is like needing something from your clients other than them being your clients. So wanting to be their best friend, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um, acting unethically in that way. But you need to have like your own support system, your own friends, your own therapist, because your clients, that needs to be a very clear boundary, really, like maintaining boundaries.
Yeah. Okay.